a fair chunk of tonight's presentation is about the condition of facilities at the district. And the caveat is that the whole discussion is by no means, there's no intention whatsoever to try and point fingers or anything at your facilities or maintenance staff, because in fact, based on my experience, sort of seeing lots and lots of districts, your staff is doing a really excellent job. So things just get old. So please don't take that as an impression. If you're not doing the job, it's not true. So throw that out there. All right. Quick agenda, what's happening tonight. We're going to start by having a quick review of our previous meeting. That will be followed by a brief presentation associated with capacity and enrollment. So we're really talking about kind of two key areas tonight, the capacity and enrollment bucket. You probably remember the buckets. I'll show them to you in a minute. And also facility condition. We'll then move to a presentation on facility condition maintenance and renovation, have a brief discussion, and then facility condition, talking about educational adequacy, and then have a brief discussion. So, any questions about that? That's sort of the overall agenda. Okay, the first 20 minutes or so review of our last meeting at PC1. You may recall our objectives for the last meeting were to really initially help you to sort of understand the overall process, which I'll share that again briefly in a second. Give you an understanding of the overall schedule so you know where we're going, understand your role. We had an overview of vision and programs from the school district, came up and gave a quick presentation, and then we gave you a very brief overview of some facilities that are out there in the world that are being built in response to the way a lot of districts are delivering education today. And then we went through a prioritized vision and goal setting session, which you participated in. And just so you know, your goals that came out of that last meeting are posted up over there for reference at any time. You probably will note we've kind of done a little bit of reshuffling of the categories they were in. And the reason for that was because we did that really quick on the fly kind of clumping session at the end of that. And then we went back to the office and looked more closely, and some of the goals that you had set really belonged in some different categories. So we read in that. And that's the earlier version has been posted on the website, and then we'll get this posted on the website too for you. We posted two white papers on the website. Some of you may have had an opportunity to read those, and if you did, thank you for that. And we'll have kind of a live summary or overview of a lot of the material that was in those white papers. So for those of you who didn't get an opportunity, you will get to kind of get a summary of that material. And that posting of white papers would be kind of a typical thing. There's an associated white paper that really belongs with the presentation. We'll be continuing to do that. So you probably remember last time we had the description of what is really contained in a long-range facility plan with regard to the types of need. This is not by any means every type of need here, but you remember it falls into kind of three kind of key buckets. We talked about the educational program last time, and tonight we're talking about these two buckets of need. And they're really the intersection of those, when you start to consider how they're interacting with each other, leads you to potential options with regard to long-range facility planning, or what you're going to do, if anything, to address that need. And not doing anything to address it is always an option too. It's up to you as community members. And the ultimate goal of the long-range facility plan really is to come up with a strategic phase plan rather than a kind of reactive Band-Aid approach. As I mentioned last time, really no school districts, they realize that you can't fix everything. It's just not practical at one time. So it's really about how you strategically manage your facilities and need over time. Quick review on schedule. You remember the first two meetings that we're having, so we're in the second meeting now, is really a summary of need. After we have these meetings, we're going to go out for broader community outreach and share how to summarize a version to hopefully a broader section of the affluent community here. That will then be followed with a series of 3 meetings, which are the plan development meetings. And after we've had those 3 meetings with you, we'll then go out for a broader outreach session and share some of the thinking that occurs in these 3 meetings with the broader community. And after we've spoken with the broader community, we'll report back to you in the final meeting to let you know what your neighbors have said with regard to thinking that you may have done or anything else that they brought to the table as well. So your role, you may remember, we're asking you to do kind of a certain set of things here. And there are things we're not asking you to do. And I won't go over them in great detail. You probably remember most of them. And I will add to that really in the spirit of both transparency and hopefully positive kind of thinking and sharing information, as we're working through these meetings, we'll really encourage people to participate and speak out and don't be afraid to get ideas out on the table, some of which you may think or you're not sure if they should be on the table. And part of the process is those things which collectively don't really seem to make sense or resonate will fall off the table over time anyway, but through a healthy, positive discussion. So, what does this process do for you and your community? Quick summary slide. Again, I won't go into all of them, but key ideas are provides a comprehensive summary of facility need, which is what we're talking about last time and in this meeting. And then it serves as that tool for strategic management of your facilities over time. And you remember the school district talking about made a brief kind of high-level summary of the district's core values, vision, and mission. And we had a discussion about these sort of key components. And she reintroduced, or maybe introduced to some folks for the first time, the group of fundamentals that are really at the foundation of the work that's being done by the district with their children here. 7 fundamentals. And then she spoke, and Fred spoke also about some of your educational programs here in the district, and where those are going, and what their real importance is for the kids here in the school district. And Joanne did a brief presentation on spaces, and this was really the purpose behind this was just to give you an idea of other things that are going on out there in the world from the standpoint of facilities. And so Joanne touched upon sort of the different concepts and delivery modes and how this might relate to the actual facilities themselves that would support that kind of learning activity, and shared with you a series of images that she spoke in reference to. And then you did your goal exercise. So great session last time. You identified, and this is just a few of them here. I know it's because of the screen, it's not super bright, but that's okay, not sharp. And this doesn't represent all the goals we had, but you did then go back and prioritize of all the goals, what was most important to you, and here are those goals. I'll kind of walk through these because it's important to sort of have you remember these. So safety was right at the top with the 29 total vote, and the big vote getter. So what you're seeing here is everything that received 3 or more votes is what we sort of put up here. And remember that just because something might have received less than that or didn't even receive a vote, it's not knocked off the table. We're tracking those, and I encourage you all to go back and revisit them. But here are the ones that got 3 or more votes. So improved traffic and background schools, the concept of locating students under one roof, flexibility and adaptability of spaces. Number 2, overall vote getter, provide built-in flexible and adaptable spaces, rethink libraries, plan for future enrollment, and flexible use in the interim. The diversity of space to support learning, provide small collaborative spaces throughout the schools. And you'll see as we're walking through this that many of these themes are actually duplicated or in parallel with what the district and our interviews with principals have said as well, which is not unusual. Support students, preserve quiet, steady spaces. Athletics, improve gymnasium athletic spaces and fields, provide for safe and controlled community use. Program, provide next generation project-based learning labs for science, and dedicated space for art. Outdoor space, there were a number of comments you could see there. And then occupational learning, more opportunities for occupational learning. Teacher support, learning for all, character and feel, food, dining, and social areas. We put these up here as overall vote getters, but none of the individual votes within that got more than 3 votes. So if you're wondering why there aren't any under that, that's why. Sustainability and technology. Okay. So here we are today, second meeting. And again, this meeting is our primary objectives associated with it are simple. There are 2 of them, and it's a big information dump. The first objective is to have you walk out of here and hopefully understand what the enrollment projections are for the next 10 years and how those enrollment projections relate to your capacity. And then the second key objective is for you to understand the condition of your facilities in 2 key areas. One is just maintenance and modernization, what's getting old, what might need to be repaired at some point in time, and then education adequacy. So that's what we're going to be asking you before you walk out of the room. All right, so any questions at this point before we dive into the first kind of piece, which is capacity? Not, that's great, and we'll dive right in. Okay. Capacity enrollment, there were a couple of reference documents that were used as the basis for any of the data that you're seeing here. First one of those is a 6-year capital facilities plan. And then the second one is Mercer School District updated projections, which are really the core pieces for the information. This comes from the 6-year capital facilities plan. And what it really does is it establishes what the capacities of your schools are at each grade level. And it's not to say that these capacities are, exact. I would say, they're within a pretty tight range. And there are a number of factors that go into how capacities are calculated. But suffice to say that this document, you're going to see numbers coming out of it, and that is really what establishes capacity for schools. And so here you see a chart of those capacities. And the red line on this chart is sort of the range that at this point in time are considered sort of the general target capacity for the elementary school. So the district saying somewhere between 450 and 500 is kind of where we want to be at this point. And you can see that the capacities in blue are the permanent capacities, and the very light gray, which is kind of difficult to read on the projected view of this, are the modular capacities added to that. So you can see that you are right at kind of the target capacities right now. And then the capacities for the middle school and the high school, and then here is Crest Learning Center. From the standpoint of enrollment projections, now, so this is the number of students that you have and what might be expected to have over time. This is what you're looking at. And the demographer, when they do the projections, they actually do a whole series of different projections, like a Monte Carlo sort of gaming exercise, but they produce what comes out of that sort of a high projection, a low projection, and a middle range projection. And typically, it's been our experience that the middle range projection is used as just the basis for a plan. And it's good that you just sort of keep an eye and have in the back of your mind the possibility that the actual enrollment over time may vary from that. Obviously, it could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more. But that's what we're using as the basis for this right now. Yeah.
probably a silly question, but I assume they take into account the amount of job growth that's in the area.
Yeah.
And then
They take in
the housing and
a lot of different factors. And there's a report which I think has it been posted on the website yet? I know it was presented to the board. Yeah. So that enrollment projection report has been posted, so you can look at it and sort of see the process that they went through and all the different considerations that were taken into it. And you can see that high and low range. But the bottom line, if we sort of jump right to the bottom line of the whole thing, is here you see the 3 grade levels, K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. And based on this most recent projection, K through 5 is projected at increasing at about 7% or so, which equates to roughly 121 students district-wide up until 2030. So that's where you'll be 10 years essentially from now, about 7% increase over time. And then the other 2 grade levels are projected at about 1%, so relatively flat growth in that area. So when we look at this enrollment projection relative to what your capacity is, this is, yes.
Can you go back to the other slide?
Yeah.
Just it's not really germane to this discussion, but I just was curious why there's a projection for, and even currently there's a projection on K through 5 at 1853, and then it drops off significantly for middle school. Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know the actual detail of what has caused that to drop off like that, and I don't know you.
It's we see cyclical waves move through the different grades. Right now we have a very large group of students in elementary, and as that moves, as fewer students come in, that wave of higher enrollment will just move through the middle school. As that goes through middle school, it'll taper off a little bit, and then it goes into the high school. And then when they
So
graduate
it's
out,
not a break at the end of fifth grade, you just disappear and
no. Yeah, it's just a wave of students moving through the system.
And that actually is a pretty common thing in districts too. You'll see in a district, oh my gosh, our problem or whatever this year in terms of enrollment is in 3rd grade. And then next year it moves to 4th grade problem. So, yeah. Thank you for that question. So here is a chart that shows you then a comparison of that enrollment projection at 2030 to your capacity. And what I will say is a little detail here is just to explain the graphic. In this particular graphic, the demographer doesn't break out students by program or a specific group of students within a particular grade level. And so because of that, students that might be attending CREST aren't identified. They're identified as overall high school level. And so you're seeing that enrollment in this overall high school piece. So it's a little bit inaccurate in the way that it's portraying the information. And this looks like officially you're going to be over-enrolled by some amount, but in reality, this number of those students are in CREST. So at that point, you're pretty much where you want to be again. And so a quick glance here, you can see that at least through 2030, your existing facilities from the standpoint of capacity should pretty much take care of you. You're not one of these districts where you're experiencing a huge amount of growth in the district or in part of your district where 1 or 2 of these schools are going crazy and you need to say, oh my gosh, we've got to find a way to manage that. It's really not the case. There's a little bit of a detail there in that some schools, at least at West Mercer Elementary, part of that enrollment, at least if you believe that this chart, may need to be managed with the non-permanent capacity that you have. And that's not something that is certainly new to the district by any means. You have had that for some time as a kind of a relief valve, so to speak, and those classrooms are there to be able to help you do that. And when we look at this chart, and we're always looking at pieces of information that might serve as a strong driver of plan options that you might be looking looking at. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, you can certainly talk otherwise and think otherwise, but I would say that capacity and enrollment is probably not going to be a major driver of this plan at all, because it's not something that's raising a lot of red flags to me when I look at this information. So, any questions about capacity and enrollment? We can go back to any of the slides that you've seen for sure. So just let me know if you'd like to go back and look at any of the slides. Yeah.
What was the logic for stopping after 10 years versus going 20 or 25 or whatever?
Well, I've had lots of conversations with demographers on this, and in fact, a number of demographers are pretty uncomfortable going out beyond 5. What they'll tell you, most of them will tell you is, the farther out you get from today, the fuzzier the crystal ball gets, basically. The amount of certainty you have quickly starts diminishing. And so a 10-year projection is, I would just maybe generally call it kind of the standard projection that is used for a long-range facility plan. There have been times where we have worked with demographers who are only willing to do a 5-year projection. And at which point I say, well, it's kind of like a misnomer. It's not a long-range plan because it's like right around the corner. We have, for those districts that appear to be on a curve where enrollment could become problematic, and if there are districts where they do not have properties primarily to manage that eventuality, we will do straight line extensions of a 10-year enrollment. We don't like doing it because it's just going to be wrong, frankly. But in those particular instances, those conversations can be useful for the districts to say, hey, do we need to go out and start looking at purchasing properties, usually in bigger districts that are not old or mature districts, but newer ones, and they have to go out and buy 3 new elementary sites and a middle school site and maybe even a high school site for 40 years down the road. So you're not in that position for sure.
Yeah, I pardon me, it strikes me that 10 years out is maybe if we're lucky when these facilities might see building or renovation, and then you practically add your projection year.
Mhm.
I guess I'm kind of wondering, how would you handle that in a plan, if we have some uncertainty,
Right.
projection going out, and so we know our region is growing. I don't
Right.
necessarily know if the population of school children is going to be growing, but
Right.
how are you going to be thinking about that?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and actually you guys are going to be thinking about that. That's what we're going to be asking you to wrestle. One of the things we'll be asking you to wrestle with. I mean, we've had groups that would, not the entire group necessarily, but we would probably be breaking you out into smaller work groups. And we'll have smaller work groups that will say, hey, we question using the middle of the road projection as the basis for the plan. We want to build in some sort of additional, relief valve, and we're going to swing to the higher projection. There's sometimes big conversations around that. And our objective ultimately one, you should put those conversations out on the table for sure for people to consider and talk about. But our objective would really be to have you guys ultimately settle down on kind of which approach sort of makes sense and be clear on why that approach makes sense. And so to touch really quickly too on your tying that to the possibility of at some point in the future doing renovations and that kind of thing, that's exactly the kind of thing that your long-range planning conversations, not in this meeting, but starting in the next meeting, will want to start putting those pieces together, and that sort of intersection in that Venn diagram. That's exactly what you're talking about right there. Yeah.
My question is with the nuclear decision, class sizes are being made smaller, and I'm not sure exactly when they're all going to kick in, but so is the capacity the size of the overall building or the actual number of classrooms we will need per grade?
Yeah, so capacity there are different ways to calculate capacity, and it varies some depending on, even within a given approach to calculating capacity, it varies per grade level. So I'll give you one example, which is sort of the easy example. At the elementary level, the way it's typically calculated are the number of general ed classrooms that you have in a school multiplied times the number of students in a classroom that you as a district say would be your target head count for that classroom. And the one thing I will say is target count of students in a classroom does not mean this is what is going to be in that classroom. It doesn't mean that this is what we're establishing the policy to be for the number of kids. What it says is, really is, it just sort of, everyone needs to recognize that that's sort of the ideal classroom, and your head counts are going to vary. Some of them might be 1 or 2 students low. Some of them might be 1, 2, or 3 students high, depending on a whole ton of factors that can play into that. But as a basis for the calculation, there's a number established. And if I go back really quick, right at the bottom here is the numbers that were identified for the purposes of this calculation. One other thing I'll add to is there's an efficiency factor then that gets applied to that as well. That efficiency factor varies per grade level. So you can see at the elementary level here, the efficiency factor is 95%, right? That's the assumed efficiency factor. And that will vary from grade level to grade level. And districts will vary that efficiency themselves and what they should be. Yeah.
Because like Donna, maybe you could ask, because like K through 3, it's now like 17
Yeah,
to
we're
1.
fully implemented
Right.
for the McCleary funding that has been allocated.
Okay.
So it's a 17 to 1, but remember that's not 17
Right.
little bodies in
Yeah.
seats, because we also factor in our specialists
Right.
to get to that ration, that number. So all of our schools are fully implemented
Okay.
for McCleary in K through 3.
I have a question here. I'll come to you. Yeah.
When this district was faced with the growth in population before Northwood was built, how much warning did the district have? Like what projections were shown? I'm just curious sometimes about these projections and how accurate they are, because like Amazon does one thing and bam, we've got an issue. And I'm just curious as to what the process was. It might be helpful to know, how did the decision to build Northwood come about? Where did these people come from? How quickly did that happen? And how quickly was the district able to respond to that increase in enrollment? So like if today we were to say, yes, we need a school, from now, how long till then? Like how long does it take?
Right. So, historically, I think I'll let the district talk about that part of it.
So I can answer.
I'm curious to know, like,
Sure.
I just feel like it fluctuates wildly here.
So in many districts, I live in Issaquah, and so that's a place with lots of land still. They're still growing and they're building, and they're building new schools because there's there's a lot more people. The last district I came from, same thing. There was just massive growth going on. The reason to build Northwood was not as much about all of that we needed a new school immediately. It was about the community wanting smaller elementary schools. And so it wasn't so much, it was really about reshuffling boundaries and having smaller elementary schools. The first bond, if you recall, those of you who were here, failed. And there were several reasons for that, but part of it was the community was not interested in 3 brand new buildings that would still have large numbers in the schools.
Can you add dates to that? We just moved here in 2016. So it's helpful
Sure.
to know, like, okay, in 2000, what we came to the community.
Perfect. So 2013, I believe, or 11? 2000, oh yeah, I got there in 9. Not 11. Thank you. 2011 was that first failed bond.
Okay.
Then we regrouped and decided that 1 elementary school and half of the middle school is what the community could really tolerate in terms of a bond. And so that was the reason. So unlike many places where you'd build that school and you'd fill it up because you have that much more capacity, you're hiring that much more staff, we literally reshuffled people and we reshuffled staff and we reshuffled families. So it was a
And
little
boundaries.
different. Yeah.
And the boundaries too,
Boundaries
which is
reshuffled,
okay.
staff reshuffled, all of that. And so it was to try to right size the school. West Mercer at the time was about 700. Lakeridge was about 640. And Island Park was 580. Kathy, help me out, 580. And so it was about trying to reduce the number, just the capacity in the schools.
Well, and if I can just add, all of our common spaces were
really packed.
Okay. No, I can't even imagine that many people at West Mercer. Yeah.
So that's I'd say a really key point is remember that those schools which were at say 600, 650 or whatever, you had that many students in a school that was designed for 450.
Right. But in a way, isn't that an enrollment issue though? Like it's like there are so many kids, even though the desire was for smaller classrooms. To me, that's like, oh yeah, that's an enrollment issue. We need a new school. So, but you're
yes.
saying there wasn't a stomach in the community for 3 new schools.
Correct.
So rather than making 3 new schools slightly bigger, just a new school on a new campus. And this land was owned by the district. This was part of the campus.
This was a former middle school, junior high site,
Okay.
which we were using as a rental site to a number of different private entities,
Okay.
which was totally torn down, and then this school was built.
It's helpful to provide a little bit of context for the newbies.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll go back here. There was a question here, and I'll go back on that.
So I guess to this extent, my question is, because real estate is tight on Mercer Island, and I've seen the growth and I've forecasted the growth and all that good stuff on who's moving in and out and all that. My bigger question is, have we already, you said about land, and one of the purposes is, for some districts is to see if they need to go out and buy new land. Well, obviously we don't have a lot of new land to buy.
Right.
So have we already approached or found out if it's even possible to add second stories to these schools, or if we tore them down, do second stories and all that kind of stuff? Or is that coming down the road and we don't know the answers to that yet because of all
Well,
the changes?
I would say just generally for this group, that's down the road. We didn't know that. I would suspect that could be part of a discussion that you might have as your long-range facilities discussions kind of, I'll say, mature over the course of 2 or 3 meetings. You may have those discussions. More broadly, I would say that the 2-story elementary is way more the norm now in districts generally than single story.
Well, that's what I'm just wondering. If one of our goals is to not take it from the middle range to move it up in capacity, right?
Yeah.
Part of that may have to account for adding a second level to
It could
parts of buildings. But if that's not an option,
Right.
then that's not even a conversation. So at what point do we find out if that's even an option?
Well, I think that my recommendation to the group would be is to discuss that, put that forward. If that approach, if you say, yeah, well, there's no reason why we wouldn't want somebody to explore that at some point in time, whether it's 10 years from now or whenever, please do that, and don't let not exploring that from your community standpoint, hinder what that possibility may be. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about, really, you're kind of a gateway, so to speak, on whether or not, hey, please do this when you end up working on projects someday. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
In the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add to the involvement thing, and having had some involvement with the prior 2 bonds, I can tell you that, and we're already only a half an hour into this meeting and already getting hung up on it.
Yeah.
It's usually a big driver, and I'm sure that but I mean, everybody here, we have the benefit of we can only expand so far, and then we run into water, so we have finite expansion, even with increasing density and all that.
Yeah.
But it's always a huge topic, right? And to feel like we're making decisions or recommendations in a bit more informed way, I think it would be really helpful. I'm actually really surprised because they never pop up, but there's actually a graph on district enrollment from 1997 through to 2019 in our packet.
Yeah.
However, I'm sure this data exists, but if there was a way to take this and superimpose it with what the projections were for the entire amount of time that they exist, and breaking them down by school, that I think would be a hugely helpful graphic.
I think that we could probably have that done pretty easily. Yeah. No, we'll take that back and we'll see if there's a demand to do that for us. Yeah.
So I know Debbie and I have been here since birth, and so I know that they closed 3 schools at some point because they didn't think the projection was there. So they closed 3 schools. And I remember sitting in a meeting, it was probably 15 years ago with Plano, and the projections were just off. And he did the open enrollment, closed it because the projections were so off. So that's why I just worry when we look at this,
Sure.
what,
Yeah.
safeguards have been put into place, what
Right.
type of statistics are being used, because I do remember him just saying, I don't remember the details, and Kathy probably knows more.
Well, I just remember the flux,
Yeah.
so we have, when we did the remodel in '94, all of a sudden we needed to pull in a couple of toilets because we had more kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do recall being in a meeting where
Yeah.
what you just said, they were wrong.
Right.
And,
Well, we were on the phone with the demographer last week, actually, and he would be the first to say that, he said it several times, that particularly now, at this point in time, it's really difficult to, feel like you can project super accurately. First of all, you're never projecting super accurately. Now particularly is very difficult. And so I think the question would be for you, regarding, collectively as a group, and this isn't a question that you need to answer tonight because it's, again, part of the first meeting of your planning meetings, is how comfortable or not are you using middle range projection? Knowing that if you opt to use, say, the high level projection or somewhere in between, then capacity and enrollment starts to move in a range within this 10-year horizon of becoming a potential driver. That's very significant because if you push enrollment into becoming a driver because you don't feel comfortable with that, then the next step in the planning process is what, if anything, do you want to do about it? And what you do about it, and literally what it means is that you have to add capacity in some fashion. There are many ways to do it. We'll talk about it when we're doing the planning approach at that time. But what you do about it, if anything, is also done within the context of the other types of need that may exist other than capacity enrollment, which we're going to talk about tonight too. So, yes.
Last time we talked about designing or remodeling buildings so that they had the ability to be remodeled over time to add capacity if necessary.
Right.
So that you're very aware that that's what you need to do.
Right, exactly. And that is, again, it's a planning strategy when you give a specific example. I think this is where what you're talking about is you may not have, let's say for a moment, and I'm not saying you're going to do this, let's say for a moment you decided for some reason to replace one of your existing elementary schools, okay? And you were not comfortable with what the projections were here. You thought that there was a possibility of enrollment going higher towards the 10-year horizon line that might be projected. If at some point your community said, okay, let's do that replacement, you might size that building to accommodate whatever, 450 students or whatever. You would then size the common or shared facilities to work if you needed to add capacity to, say, some new target that you wanted to establish. And then some years later, if, or maybe not that far down the road, depending on how wrong the enrollment projections were, you would add that capacity, but the school had been designed to really accept that. And that is a long-range strategic planning approach that you will discuss. I have no idea if that's the kind of thing you'll talk about or not. It's really, again, through your discussions and what makes sense, after you've seen what you've seen here. Okay. We have about maybe 5 more minutes if there are any other questions on this topic, and then I'm going to roll us into the next area of need. And we can come back to, like, at the end of this, we can kind of look back. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. All right, so our next area is facility condition, specifically as it relates to maintenance and potential renovations at some point in the future. I'll hopefully be able to cover this in 30 minutes or less, and then we'll have a discussion about what you've seen if you have any other questions. And I will tell you that this is going to be a onslaught of information. So, basically. Okay, so a key reference document here for this is the study and survey update, which was done by the LRFP architects and completed in September 2018. And that was an update to their previous study and survey, which was completed in 2010, I believe. And this study and survey is something that is done for the state and it goes into a large state database, so the state sort of understands how districts kind of stack up relative to each other, and it also helps them understand how your individual facilities stack up with regard to each other within the district. So the first question when it comes to maintenance and renovation and or replacement or whatever is how long you expect things to last. And we're not proposing here that this is the answer to that question. I will tell you right now. This happens to be just one group's answer to this question, the Government Finance Officers Association. And so there are, other organizations out there that probably establish when they expect to replace things. And for some of these, you might have some very significant questions about really it's only supposed to last that long. But the point of this is that things do have an expected life cycle, and it varies depending on what system or what material you're talking about specifically. So some of these things you'll see being replaced by the district as they wear out, like carpeting and that sort of thing. But this one you'll note that the permanent structure, which is really kind of a catch-all thing, they're permanent structures and all of the interlocking things that are associated with it. These guys expect them to last around 55 years or so. Modern buildings, when you speak to most engineers or architects, they might say you might have a life cycle for a building of 75 years or something like that. But it's not to say that every building is good at 75 years, because that's not necessarily the case. So I just want to throw this out there. Things have life cycles. So within that context, then, if you just look at that particular metric, and you guys in your heads can determine where, if you want to move that line up or whatever, it's up to you. It's a thought exercise for you. You can see what the age of your existing buildings are now, which are indicated by the light blue bars. And then the dark blue bars indicate the point in time when a major renovation or overbuild was done. So for those folks who have lived on the island for a long time, you probably remember back in the 1990s, depending on the particular facility, it might have been 95, it might have been 97. There were some major projects that were done on these facilities, and this indicates how old that major renovation or overbuild is now at this point in time. So Highland Park, the major work there was done 25 years ago. So that just sort of gives you that context of relative age. And age is only one teeny factor in a whole bunch of other factors that determine the actual condition of the building and the condition of the systems within that building, which we'll look at here in just a second.
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question to that? Because the first slide that, for instance, said the building was 55 years.
Yeah.
And then a renovation was 10 years, let's say. So does that mean at whatever point they did the renovation, you now extend the life 10 more years? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
So we'll kind of get into that a little bit. The way to think about this, we might as well touch on it now, is think of a building as a whole series of systems, essentially.
Right.
And in fact, when most facility assessments are done and scoring is done, it breaks out each one of those systems with regard to how that gets scored. The scoring you're going to see tonight, this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded answer, but the scoring you're going to see tonight is not destructive assessment. So people aren't carrying into walls to see the condition of things inside the walls that can work underneath the concrete slab. They're doing a walkthrough and they're basing it on their knowledge of what they're seeing, basically, the condition of the systems they're seeing. Major renovations, it depends on what you're talking about when you do a major renovation or overbuild. If you were to go in and replace all of the major systems in a building, then you would be doing what we would term as a full modernization. And when we think of it that way, what you would ideally be doing, this is an ideal world, right? Because you're sinking a bunch of money into this building to extend its life significantly so you don't have to replace it.
Right.
And in the ideal world, one of the things you might want to do is to make it a more efficient building too, energy efficient. So if you were to do that, and you're looking at insulating and all that as part of a major systems replacement. I'm not saying you're going to do that or should do it, but that's kind of where your head should be. So if you did this major renovation 25 years ago, depending on exactly what was done, like if all the pipes and all the mechanical systems and everything were replaced, you would probably get a significant extension of the life of that building.
Okay.
If you did not replace, piping under the slabs and all that, waste lines, drain lines, whatever, just as one example, you still have 63-year-old pipes there.
Got it.
So now at some point in time, you may have to deal with that. And then that, when you look at the overall structure, the question is, how do you want to deal with that? So we're not going to tell you how you should. You've got to kind of talk about that. Give some recommendations. Makes sense. Okay. All right. Quick note on this seismic. Were also a series of seismic reports done on your facilities. And I put this up here, which is almost impossible to read, but I'll give you why it's up here and the lowdown on it. Really, this is up here because the way to think about seismic, I would say, is this. Think about seismic as rolling compliance, all right? So if you can have a building that was built in 2013, and it was built to comply with the current seismic code, and 7 years later, a new code is issued, and typically seismic is relooked at in each of those codes, and there's some adjustment one way or the other with regard to how seismic relates to that code. Historically, you can see here, sort of in the Puget Sound area, your seismic zone, you can see, well, prior to 1975, there's essentially no code that people were designing to, right? There's certainly no seismic code. People weren't even really thinking about it. And as time moved on, 1976, UBC has Uniform Building Code. You can see the new codes coming out, and the approach they took towards just the seismic zone itself. So it went from nothing at all to the seismic zone in the Puget Sound as being low or moderate to moderate to moderate high to high. And so there's this change over time. And the question for any building is, how far out of compliance is it with the current code? And knowing that almost every building is out of compliance, except the newest ones, which will be out of compliance very soon. And are you comfortable with its relationship to how far out of compliance it is? And there have been a number of upgrades that have been done in the district over time. And the seismic engineers that went through and did these reports, which you can look at and read through, kind of came up with some summaries. And the bottom line is pretty generally across the board, their conclusions were that there weren't any major concerns with regard to collapse, but they do expect significant damage to happen. There's no surprise there. And in fact, it could be enough, depending on the size of the earthquake, that you couldn't repair the damage. You may have to replace the building. And that's, from our standpoint, certainly no surprise. I mean, that's consistent pretty much everywhere with all districts' facilities except the newest ones. So that's pretty standard. So you can look through these, and this is just the bottom line summary of what they said about the buildings. But they're pretty much consistent across the board with regard to their opinion of where you're at. And they did say at some point in time in the future, if you're doing some work, if you happen to be doing some work in part of the high school building, you might want to do some seismic upgrades in that area too. But it's if you happen to be doing work in that particular area of the building. So I wanted to share this with you. And again, you can get in and look at these reports if you want to get into the nitty-gritty detail of what they're really talking about. Facility condition, this is the score I was talking about. So this is the score that BLRB Architects did and submitted in 2018. This is an ICO score, which is basically that we're looking at the visual condition of the building. The higher the score, the better. So here you see kind of a breakout of if your building were down here, they'd be considered unsatisfactory. poor, fair, good, and excellent. And based on these scores, straight up, your buildings are scoring pretty well. They're actually in pretty good condition with just the visual walk around. Again, it's not destructive, so they're not getting into walls and any of that. They're not breaking under slabs and looking at things. So this is not uncommon either from what we would see. You might see older buildings scoring relatively well. You'll notice that some of the facilities here, and I apologize for the resolution, were not scored. And that's because the state scoring doesn't score facilities that are not actually schools themselves. So that's why you're not seeing bars on these particular buildings. So the scores were not there. And your two kind of lower scoring ones are the middle school, kind of the old building in the middle school, and the 300 wing in the middle school. There's no big surprise there. Probably in Island Park is slightly lower scored than the other three elementary scores that they tallied. So if you look at the systems breakout that is in their reports, they really sort of rated the schools by system on a fair to poor kind of judgment, I guess, when they went around and looked at it. So that's what you're looking at. So if something was judged fair to poor, that's where it's kind of landing basically. And there were no other highly detailed scores that could swing it slightly one way or the other. But I would just encourage you to kind of look at these as almost a fuzzy big picture of individual schools. So here you see the big issues are the mechanical system and the roof at Island Park. That's what they identified from a systemic standpoint. This list of items here, which are significant deferred maintenance item needs, are it comes from the district, things that they know that if they were looking at this particular site are things that could be addressed at some point in the future. They've either had problems with them or are having problems with them. And we'll show you some images here of a few of those things. We don't have a ton of images, but you'll kind of be able to see a few things anyway. And so Island Park here, there's already been a lot of conversation about safety and sort of vehicular traffic ingress onto the site. And so that's something that's not ideal. Just suffice to say, if you were to do something at some point in time to the site, that's one of the conditions you'd probably try and fix if you could. There are, intermittent water issues of bucket catching water in a particular area, so that we might find those kinds of things. There is the access going out to the street with regard to just controlling students as they're moving from one building to the other, being able to get right out. The modular buildings, and you'll see that's kind of recurrent. And it was a comment from some of the principals that just flow between modulars and the main primary buildings. Here's a shot of that. You probably noticed on that list asphalt grinding and repaving, and so you can kind of see a little bit of that kind of thing here. So those are the sorts of things that are going through in scoring, and if you and those are the things on the district's list as well. And so you're going to see a series of slides like this for each of the schools, so you can kind of quickly compare them. Lake Ridge, again, the list of items. We don't need to go into in great detail, but it's worth taking a few seconds to scan it. Again, the primary issue of Lake Ridge appears to be the roof. All the other systems seem to be fair to good condition generally, which presumes there's probably at some point some mechanical work that's done at Lake Ridge, I would assume. So here's Lake Ridge, you're all familiar with it. Speaking with the principal there again, that some of the pickup and drop-off issues are not optimal at this school either. Some of the parents park across the street, and so kids are kind of going across the street to get to it because of just the limited access. So again, if you were to do something with the school at some point in time in the near or distant future, whatever that might be, that would be a condition that you might look at trying to address just simply from a safety standpoint, day-to-day safety standpoint. Again, similar issues with the asphalt there pretty much throughout. This is a photograph of the food service carts, which not only at this school, but I think at Island Park, and I don't know about others, are actually stored outside during the day. And the reason for that is it's not optimal for sure. The reason for that is because there's really no space to store it inside, and when the cafeteria is being used as a gym for physical education, you can't put them in there, leave them in there, or put them in there. So that's not optimal. Some photographs of some piping in the building, and I'm assuming it's probably leaking. And again, I want to emphasize this is not any sort of a statement on your facilities group's ability to maintain the buildings or not. They're doing a good job. These systems, when you have pipes that are 60 years old in a building, they just get old systemically. And it's really hard to stay in front of that. It's just the way it is. And then other systems that are just starting to see age here. Northwood, no surprise, brand new school, easy to score. So not too much to say there. Yeah, and you know what it is. Here we are, you know what it is. So West Mercer, again, the list coming from the district. Roof seems to be a consistent theme. It's about time that something be done at some point in the not too distant future. And mechanical again, MEP systems are kind of scoring for West Mercer, which presumes not as much might have been done mechanically as at Lake Ridge. Quick shot of Lake Ridge. There wasn't a ton of comment about vehicular sort of issues here, buses and that kind of thing. So I don't know what to take by that, but it's, again, not nearly the kind of comment being brought to the forefront as, say, at Island Park. As many of you know, they have a really nice courtyard there. It was recently redone. It's really nice. It's beautiful. It's a great kind of part to the school. And I think a very positive thing. And, this image is meant to show kind of a couple things, just security or lack thereof, getting back to the side. It's kind of an open campus. And if you look close enough, and this really applies to, a lot of different areas at a lot of different sites, just kind of ADA or accessibility compliance. So, here you sort of see these stairs going up to this upper play area here. And having, I'll just sort of say the ideal position, having a common way for everybody to be able to kind of get to different facilities or things is really kind of a target to try and work towards with regard to accessibility. Just this image shows just kind of storage issues. It's not necessarily people being sloppy in schools. You'll see they have big things that they have, and sometimes they may or may not have places for them to go. Yes.
Yeah, you talked about utilization of the building before. Are there any best practices around utilization of the whole plot of land? Because when I look at West Mercer and more like Island Park and Lake Ridge, there's like huge pieces of real estate behind that the students don't use at all.
Right.
So are there best practices? Are we going to talk about that? Of the whole plot of land?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, I think that's another question as you're looking at planning. I would say, just as a general comment, that your elementary sites are not large sites for elementaries. I would call them appropriately sized. And so it's not as if you have this big site that you're just not using very well. It's really on kind of a site-by-site basis. Let me just bounce back, as you referenced it real quick, to Island Park. Great example. This area right here is topographically challenged in a way. It's 5 to 7 feet, I would say at least, lower. And so that's one of the things you would want to look at, on any site is what is the topography and what does that mean in terms of use. Knowing that at any school, whether it be elementary or middle or other, there should be fields, green spaces for the kids to go to. So here, they have to unfortunately go down to do that. This area on this site is a little bit of a challenge too. There's some sensitivity of what's in there, in terms of natural sorts of things. So each of these sites have these little pockets of challenge, I would say. You could overcome that. But I generally would say you are using your elementary sites for sure pre-addition. I think you guys are doing a good job. I don't know how much more efficiently you can use them, frankly. This one's got, Lakeridge has got, a very big play area. And if you speak with the principals there, it's too big for them, just from a standpoint of supervision. So I don't know what that means. Do you sort of cordon part of it off so that kids can't get there? Maybe, that could be a strategy. I do know that kids have a lot of fun running around there because I was standing there watching at the time. They just can't be supervised. So, okay. Did that kind of answer?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. Again, some accessibility on the inside of the building, just kind of showing the obvious there. Islander Middle School, obviously the new addition that was done doesn't need really anything, as you would expect. It's new, all the systems are new. So really, the buildings that you want to look at the scores for to try and understand where you're at are the 100, 200, and the 300 building. And so that's what this is really representing here. The roofs are a big problem, probably not a surprise to any of you. There's leaking there. If you go there, you'll see tarp over certain parts of it. So that needs to be addressed at some point in the not too distant future, I suspect. Mechanical systems. So you can see across the board, these scores are just generally kind of lower. And I didn't score the building. That was our job, but just walking through that facility and looking at it myself, these scores would register. I would probably score 2 dry scoring system. So here are at Islander, just pointing out the obvious, new building here, absolutely no problem, great facility. It's really these two that are being scored. So there you go with the new building. And then in the existing building, if you look at that, there's been some work done just trying to basically patch things like soffits that have over many, many years rotted out and had problems associated with them. I think there have been, when I was there, they talked about some leaks that had come down through the classrooms, but they were mostly associated with, I think, mechanical systems, are actually leaking too. So I think that might be what that is showing here at this point. Here you see just some water-related staining on the concrete masonry walls, which is never a great thing, ideally, over time. You want to try and stop that if you can. And then just a photograph of that upper roof space, staining from just leaking over time. Roofs start to leak and you patch them over time, but there is, it starts to take a toll inside the building. And then I don't know how much it really applies solely or totally to this site, but just generally thinking about condition, both not only of the building, but the site itself, and the usability of, say, your fields through a larger part of the year, not only for PE, if it's not raining and you get out and just a huge mud hole, but also for community use too. So you can be thinking about, oh yeah, that's right, there is this one field in our district that's continually a problem with regard to efficient utilization over time. So that's something you can think about.
In the narrative about the problems there, one of the highlights they had was the extreme heat during the summertime, during some parts of the year.
Right.
What was the cause of that?
In the buildings, you mean? Yeah. Well, really, my understanding is that other than the modulars, the portable buildings at the elementaries, and all the older buildings, none of those buildings are really air conditioned.
This is just the middle school.
Oh, just the middle school. Yeah. In the older building, that probably would be the same issue, is that, well, I'll just say one of the major complaints, and I don't mean complaint in a negative way, you guys can call it comments also, typically have to do in any district with mechanical systems. And older mechanical systems are notoriously hard to balance facility-wide. And what ends up happening then is you end up getting parts of your building cold and part of them hot. And a lot of times they're that way in exactly the wrong season. And part of that is as systems get older, and Tony, you could probably speak to this, but it starts getting difficult to actually get replacement parts for your old systems. And so if you have that challenge where you're having trouble finding, or your controls, you have to replace your control system, So that's definitely a contributor. And if the older buildings, like the 200 and 300 build, or 1 and 200 building are air conditioned, I don't think, then on the west sides of those and south side, it's going to get hot in the spring.
I would add to that, Leroy, that all of our older facilities, the 3 older elementaries, we drink everything.
Exactly.
I was really surprised that the administrative team didn't make that same comment there, and I think they were just overwhelmed with Leroy coming through. But I hear that every year, every spring.
And you believe that the reason for that is what he just said.
They're not air conditioned. You know, they're designed to keep a constant temperature, you know, and airflow. If it gets to be 95 outside, your home's not air conditioned, it gets warm.
Systems can't keep up.
I just can't keep up with it because basically we're drawing that outside air in to circulate fresh air. So the only way I can bring fresh air in is to bring it from the outside, and if it's 95.
Right. And the way to think about it is, you know, in new buildings, when they're being energy modeled and you know, trying to push energy costs down but maintain temperature, one of the things that's looked at is how many bodies are in the room, right? Because every body is a little heat generator. And you can literally see plumes of heat coming off of people's heads in a small room. And so, unlike your home, where it's like, you know, to go to your point, Tony, if it's 90 degrees outside and your home is not air conditioned, it starts to heat up. Now think about that with 24 bodies in a relatively small room, and it starts getting hot fast. So.
That are going in and out of the building all day long opening the door, unlike again at home where you leave the doors closed.
Yeah. I saw a hand over here.
So does Northwood have air conditioning?
Not throughout.
No.
Not throughout. They have a different type of heating system, which has actually really proven to be very successful to keep the classroom temperatures a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, and that's something that it doesn't have to necessarily be this key part of a long-range facility plan, but it's definitely something that you already talked about a little bit in your goals. There was this, you made a reference to category of sustainability as one example. Those types of goals should get thought about in the long-range facility plan because there are strategies, so what Kenny was talking about, that are used in this building that increase the efficiency, the energy efficiency of the building and keep the temperature in control. So a lot of those are passive systems that really take this in here. You've got exposed mass concrete floors. There are lots of different strategies that can be used to help control that temperature without having to put big energy hog mechanical systems in the buildings to just be stronger and over wrestle it. Right? It's kind of smart design rather than overpowering design.
You said these were all visual inspections. How often do they do an actual inspection?
I think about every 10 years, approximately. Yeah. So the previous one was, and again, these are being done submitted to the state. So the previous one, a report was in 2010, I believe, and this is 2018. So
But the visuals being submitted to the state, not the actual inspection, or both?
no, they will. Well, what they do is they send out a team and they walk through every one of your buildings. And they literally have a little scoring template, and they use this state scoring template to rate each of your facilities, having walked through them.
I just wonder because you can put a lot of lipstick on stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so they're probably missing a lot of stuff that we're not seeing in this. So how does that get accounted for?
Yeah, it's very difficult to account for. And I sort of alluded to it. Let me just go back really quick to this slide. I kind of beat around the bush a little bit. This slide, when I was saying, here, you have these older buildings. And yet when you look at this, the scoring is pretty darn good. It's, fair to good. And what that says to me, and we see this in many, many districts that we work with, is that your facilities group's doing a really good job.
Right.
Because they're basically making things look pretty darn good. And it's not to say that they aren't good. I mean, they've done a pretty fabulous job kind of keeping everything running and finding out where the high points of maintenance need to happen and deal with them over time. But at the same time, you have to realize that there are systemic things that in most of your buildings, maybe all of them, are very difficult to deal with. Mechanical is one, but it's probably it's actually easier to deal with than the plumbing and drainage and sewer kind of components of that, because these buildings are slab on grade, largely slab on grade. And so all of that stuff is underground and it's really difficult to get to. So it's hard for them to even deal with it. And you're going to see some photographs of a building where you see some of the piping that illustrates that. So
I mean, I appreciate what they do because they do a wonderful job maintaining it. I just wonder the validity of information if it's good, but really underneath it all, it's not.
Right, so
Right.
when they
Yeah.
come out to do a survey, it's not, we don't hand them a set of keys and off they go.
Right.
The facility folks are with them, I'm with them, we do go into the equipment, we do dive in.
Oh, okay.
And we share with them, what are the problems been over the last 10 years? As we looked at the last report, what is, not gone so well. So there is a little more to it than just.
Okay. It just made it sound like it was a
visual
little
report,
more
yeah.
of
So
a, just a
it's-
visual walkthrough, which doesn't tell you much.
Do they scope the sewers and such?
We don't go to that. But we do talk about those types of things where you'll see that in the report.
And I should say too, if you, a lot of facility assessment scoring is probably the other major form that facilities are assessed in creates this thing called FCI, Facility Condition Index. And ICOS is a little bit, it's almost kind of an inverse of that. So in facility FCI, the lower the score, the better. And again, this is an inverse. But one of the things they're looking at is they're trying to get an understanding of, okay, what is the extent of maintenance that needs to be done in this building? Where does that appear to be? And then in some instances, they will begin to equate projected costs with what it would take to do that. And depending on the condition of the facility and the age of the facility, many of them will get to a point where, and this is a term that's used in the state of Washington, new and new becomes kind of a consideration. It's like, okay, is this facility at a point where we want to put this amount of resources into it, or should we do new, build, replace it in lieu of fixing it, basically? And that's kind of a question that you'll probably talk about during your long-range planning discussions. Okay. There we go. All right. Mercer Island High School. Here's a list of a few things that have been identified here, some of which were echoed by the principal and staff there. And you can see that generally speaking, it's scoring higher than both the middle school and the elementary schools. Probably not a big surprise. It's in pretty good condition. So there's, you all know the high school and where it's at. Of course, the new additions that were done, those within that facility score much higher. They're newer and served well by the systems. But there are other components in the building, so flooring that's just kind of wearing out. You can see the cracking in the floor tiles there, and some of the exterior siding has kind of seen better days. So, this is the kind of thing that I would categorize this if I were to put it in a category of protect capital investment, which to me means at some point in time in the not too distant future, you probably want to do something about that because water infiltration will get in and cause much bigger problems than you probably got going there right now. So that's something to think about. And then just this is at the bleachers there, and just not an optimal liability condition, really, more than anything, I guess. All right, so Crest Learning Center, scoring a little bit lower than the base building, but the roof is an outlier with regard to something probably needing to be done in the not too distant future. And you can take a quick look at some of the items that have been identified by the district wanting to be dealt with there at some point in time. And for those of you who are not familiar with Crest, this is where there's the district building, Northwood, and here's Crest right here relative to the high school. And that's That's Crest. And this is the kind of stucco exterior. You can see probably needs a little PLC at some point in the future. And then this is more, probably more aesthetic than anything, although over time it can cause problems. This is just salts that are coming out of that masonry due to water. This is on just the wall out front. But whenever you see this in a building, you want to sort of beware, particularly if it's on the wall of the building, because it usually means there's moisture somewhere in there where it shouldn't be. It's drawing the salt out of the brick. So if you stack them all up side by side, you can kind of get 50,000 foot level of which facilities start to pop out of the pack. These are the 6 older facilities that were scored. And again, there were a number that were not scored, like the admin building, because it wasn't a school, it was not scored. But of those that were, you can see. So Island Park and middle school, generally speaking, are probably on the lower end of things here, with the other 2 elementary schools not too far behind. And then a few instances of things that really need to have attention paid to them in the too distant future. So for the facilities that were not scored, because they're not schools, you've got the pool facility. Here is a short list of some significant maintenance needs that have been identified by the district, and then stuff that they're getting ready to do or have been ongoing. And these pipes, right, Tony, have been basically relined. So that's prior to relining them. But wanted to show you that because admittedly, a pool environment is a way more caustic environment than a typical domestic water situation. But this gives you a feel for some of the things you might find. And I've seen in many instances pipes under 1950s schools that are not too different than that, actually. So these got to a point where they needed to be realigned, and that was the approach that was taken. The administrative building, I'm sure you all know where it is, but it's right there on the corner. And here are some of the maintenance needs that have been identified associated with it. Replacement, you're seeing probably very consistent sort of items popping up from facility to facility, again, largely just due to their age. And the takeaway here is don't worry about maybe specific things so much, but just know that there's a lot of stuff that could be done in this facility. And it's a pretty broad spectrum of things. And then the support facilities, which include the maintenance shop, maintenance operations, transportation, and bus lot, they're all located, for those of you that know, right here in the middle of campus. And they weren't scored, but they're all pretty much of this kind of similar vintage and condition. And then, of course, Boys and Girls Club here. And the district doesn't own the building per se, they own the land, but it is just there as a reminder that it sits on district property. And I'm sure you all are familiar with it, but there it is. Again, not scored and is not part of the district's real estate holdings, at least in the building. Okay, so any questions? We have some discussion around just what you've seen come out. Maintenance, renovation.
This may go back to the very beginning overall process. Last time we asked if you had process for talking to the teachers.
Yeah.
Is that in place? Have you?
Yeah, so as part of the outreach sessions, which are coming up, I think on the week of January 13th, which is prior to when you actually start doing any planning work. We have planned to meet with, and it hasn't been published yet, but it will, the the flyers will go out with both students and staff. And so we're going to set times where they'll be able to come in and we'll give them a high level, very foreshortened sort of overview, and then time for them to comment and add information to the discussion. And that will be, we'll collect that information at that time, both from students and staff. And then we'll bring back what we've heard to your first planning meeting. So as you're just getting ready, you will have, of course, seen all this already, but as you're getting ready to start asking the question, okay, what, if anything, do we want to do about it? One end, you might say, we don't need to do anything. The other end, there's a lot to talk about. You'll have that information as well. And then that same week, we will be doing a highly summarized presentation to your broader community too. So there'll be a couple of evenings where that'll be put out in a flyer so everyone knows, and they can come in from throughout the island and see what we've been talking about, and then provide some input too. We'll boil that in, and you'll have that information prior to first time.
Will that include the Northwood teachers as well?
Yes, it'll be all teachers can come to it, and I think we're looking at one night for staff and one night for students.
One for staff and one for students that are afternoon.
Yeah.
Right after school, and then 2 evenings.
And 2 evenings, yeah.
It'd be really nice to have some specific questions for Northwood teachers, you know, as far as how they're utilizing those small pods. And,
Yeah.
What are the pluses and minuses
Yeah.
of this building?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, does it work?
Yeah.
Right.
Does it work or does it
Right.
not?
Right.
Another group you might want to do some outreach to are the PTA councils or boards, because Mercer High School is sitting on a 41,000 surplus that we want to spend this year. I happened to talk to somebody who there's like 2 people kind of working on that, and she's like, "Oh, we're going to make small spaces in the library," and I was like, "Oh, really?" Because I happen to be in this facility.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, you know, they sometimes they
Right.
are thinking one thing and probably need to be looped in, but
Right.
some of them are on some surpluses that would help.
And what you wouldn't want to do is have them do that, spend the money, and then it gets undone
Well,
3 years later.
That's, we do have PTA reps from each site that we reached out to the PTAs and said, please have someone from each of the individual PTAs represented here. So there should be someone from each of the individual PTAs represented in this group.
And hopefully, other members of the PTA will come to these open houses too that we're going to hold, because we're just going to be kind of big information vacuum cleaners at those and gathering stuff up and trying to summarize it so that we can share it back out to you guys.
That actually brings me to my question, which is, are we going to also get before the next meeting what is already in plan to be repaired or fixed? Like you mentioned, one of the roofs needs to be done now. Well,
right.
It's going to be done now. That may change how we want to use the building, or if we were planning on raising the roof or I don't know that any of that's in plan, but
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is what's already in plan to be
Yeah,
fixed.
I think we can get you that information, and it could be that some of the things that are discussed here, if they're not being driven by like some time criticality, where if we don't fix this now, or it's going to be a disaster.
Right.
It's possible that some of the things that you say here might defer some of those items out.
Right.
Because depending on the approach that you have and whether or not those approaches or that approach is also corroborated by the broader community, that might cause some readjustment to planned work if it's not absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It would be helpful to me to understand what the maintenance spend is or has been over the last 10 years or whatever per building.
Yeah.
And also what kind of, improvements budgets have been allocated and spent.
Yeah, I think Jennifer reminded me it's the whirlwind of information, but I think there's a bar chart in the white paper that identifies recent expenditures.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, that's from the capital.
Yeah, capital expenditure, right, on buildings.
Well,
maintenance.
there's maintenance, ongoing maintenance. Just, if one school is taking up 40% of the maintenance budget of the district, if you're going to know that.
Yeah.
And also capital expense.
Yeah, I think we can get that information for you too. Yeah, district's got it.
And is there an ongoing capital reserve fund that is drawn from, or how does the, where does the money come from
we
on
have-
an annual basis?
We have government accounting operates in funds. Everything is set into different buckets. There is a specific bucket that is directly for capital improvements, building buildings, adding rooms, making large modifications, large repairs. That's the capital projects fund. That is funded directly out of the capital technology levy that was passed 3 years ago, 2016. It will be up for renewal in 2022. So it's a 6-year levy. The average collection for this levy cycle is about $6.5 million. 3.5 million of that is dedicated directly to the capital, to the technology side of the levy. So we get about $3 million a year to work with. So depending on what project we're looking at, it may take us a couple years to save up to work on it. The roof on the high school, that was $1.5 million, close to $2 million. That took a little bit of time. We're working on Northwood. We've worked with Mary Waite. That's a $3 million plan.
So it's all from the levies.
It's all the capital funds comes directly from the levies. There's no state money. There really isn't any state money. If you're building a project like Northwood in the high school, that got out of the $100 million that we spent on the last bond, we got about 3.2 in matching funds from the state.
And only on the middle school.
Not on
Wow.
And why is that? Because the state is so competitive for school construction?
Well, no, it's a complicated funding formula, that you're gonna talk a little bit about square feet per student that Roy will talk about, but it's a formula of what the state says you can have for square footage, and then what the state says, construction cost per square foot would be. And then there's the Mercer Island factor that they add to that. So on the middle school, it didn't cover sales tax. Project. And that was all we were eligible for in $100 million.
But you're not alone, because there are a lot of states that are like this, and it has, in fact, in Oregon, it hasn't been until the last probably 6 or 7 years that the school district was be eligible to get anything in any sort of match law. There was 0 state funds. So they've started to realize that they need to find some way to help districts a little bit, because their facilities are dying. So, any other questions right now?
Well, I was just gonna comment that prior to 1993 or 4, before the first major remodel of the 3 elementary schools and middle school, there was no long-term plan for capital projects or for maintenance and operations. And that was the first thing that the facility committee, which was citizens as well as staff, came up with, was we really need long-term short-term plans.
Right.
And so it's a group started like this, back in the zeros.
Right.
Which is pretty neat. But it was so sad that all the buildings were in such terrible shape.
Right.
And then
Yeah, and unfortunately, the district has seen fit and seen the value in this. They continue to see the value in it, and just one reason alone is the reason that was brought up over here, where it was you don't want to be doing something on a facility that you're going to basically throw that capital away in 2 years or 3 years or even 5, depending on how much you spend. So, theoretically, this process should help you avoid those situations as much as possible. Yeah.
Just curious, from the time the bond was floated to the time Northwood was built, 3 years? How many years was it?
Passed in 2014 and we occupied in 2016, so it was a very quick turnaround.
Okay, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's super.
Right, well, part of it was you were building a new school, so there wasn't a displacement.
That's right, even if it was kids out,
Right.
yeah.
And I would also say, to credit the district, there was some
planning, it was done as part of the thought process to make sure that the asks to the community represented the need for the school. So it's not a full spectrum of what it took to design the project.
And the community was behind getting groups. We were all together. So if we were all working together, we were already thinking through what's this going to look like. And Dean was way out ahead in terms of trying to make sure that as soon as it passed, we were into the bonds. We were selling the bonds within like literally 2 weeks after that passed.
So I think it goes to your question is how long does it take from an established need to a completed facility? 2 years is extremely short.
It's probably
3, 4, 5 years would be more like it.
I mean, it takes between a year and 18 months, depending on either the size of the school. If it's a high school, it could take 2 years to design. And then it takes about 18 months to 2 years. If it's a high school, 3 years to build. So it depends on all sorts of different factors.
The addition to the middle school, how long did that take to kind of plan and build? I'm just curious because if some of these schools were talking additions versus
That was all
redoing.
on the same
Same time frame.
track. So the bond passed in February of 14.
Yep.
And we occupied in September of 16. So it was really, 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years. But as Joanne noted, there had been substantial planning that had gone
Sure.
into the project prior. So there was maybe 6 months of work that had been done prior to the bond being passed. So 3 years is still a very efficient turnaround.
And that's an addition, not a whole new school. So
Well, Northwood and middle school was in essence.
together.
building.
Got
We
it.
were actually able to cut a year off of that at the high school and do those 3 small additions.
Yep.
So those were actually started in 2014, but again, I think the design was further along by the time the bond.
Got it.
Any other questions about conditioning or anything? Okay. Why don't we take a 5 or maybe even 10-minute break? We're ahead of schedule, which is great. I would love to get you out here early if I can, but I also want to get your questions answered. So yeah, why don't we take a 5 or 10-minute break? You can grab something to eat, and then please come back. We have one more section left.
So you're traveling. Well, great. So I thought I would just reach out to you and see if you're good. We did for some of them.
So this last bit is facility condition, educational adequacy. And we're going to take about 15 minutes or so to give a high-level overview of just what some of the district staff that we've spoken with have said, and to show you a few images of schools, some of which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. One of the reference documents associated with this category of need is actually the previous study and survey, because along with scoring the facility's condition from a maintenance and renovation standpoint, they also took a look at it from the standpoint of educational suitability. So this area is a little bit hard to get your arms around to some extent because from a quantification standpoint, there's not a lot out there that you can really grab onto data-wise and say, hey, this is adequate or not, or what is adequate. But one of the metrics that are out there that I think is useful, and particularly for those districts that have facilities of different vintages, meaning ranging from some districts, 19, 20, or 30 up through present time, is the square footage per student. And so it gives you really a sense of how all of your facilities stack up from that one particular metric. And some districts use that then as a tool to have discussions around equity across their district and whether or not everyone is in a similar situation, not exactly the same, but similar situation from the standpoint of how facilities are supporting the programs. So again, kind of fuzzy for you guys out there, but these 3 lines here are national medians for the three different grade levels: high school level, the middle school level, and the elementary school level. Yeah.
Why didn't?
We put it on there just because it is a local school district. We can grab more.
Look, I mean, it's consistently in the top 3 in the state,
Yeah.
right? Bainbridge. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like
Yeah.
something to it's similar.
You might consider it, some of you may consider it a peer district or not. There may be others, and if you said, hey, can you get information on another district X, we could probably go out there and see if we can get that information and come back and share it with you. So we wanted to, the intention here was to try and show you a couple things. One is this kind of national median, which is really coming out of a school planning organization, a nationwide school planning organization. They go out and they grab data from districts all over the country, and then they start parsing it and looking at different pieces of it. And this is one of the things that they look at. And then we wanted to also give you this local version as well, which happened to be Bainbridge in this case. So at the high school level, the national median is 172 gross square feet per student. So that's the overall size of the school. At the middle school level, it's about 153 gross square feet per student. And at the elementary level, 137 gross square feet per student. We have seen in school districts throughout the state of Oregon and numerous ones throughout the state of Washington, facilities that they're designing kind of track relatively closely to those numbers. There's definitely some variation there for sure. That variation will be sort of brought into a project depending on specific programs associated with a given school level. So and even here you'll see some variation as your newer facilities relate to these numbers. For comparison then, Island Park at the elementary level relative to the 137 is at 118 square feet per student. Lake Ridge is at 114.
Does that include portables and stuff?
That's permanent capacity.
Permanent.
Yeah. And then Northwood is at 139. The 166 is if you went and actually measured this whole school, that's what you would end up with. But that's because there's a chunk of this school that has some specific programs that might not necessarily be directly associated with an elementary ed spec that you've created. An ed spec, I can't remember if I talked about that, but that's basically a document that school districts get their staff together and they say, okay, we're going to be doing a new school. Let's create a document that explains what we're doing, which is essentially how big the school is, more detailed descriptions of the programmatic needs associated with it, adjacencies, those kinds of things. And so it could be said that, one way to think about this is your sort of baseline ed spec might land around 139 square feet per student, which is right there in the ballpark. And then if you had additional programs that push it beyond that, it might creep up in square footage. And that's something that you see at other districts too, where they'll have a high school or whatever that might be associated with fine arts or something. So that program will grow and cause the square footage to get larger. West Mercer is at 119. I would say, generally speaking, this is not a surprise to anybody who looks at a lot of districts because older schools, very general statement, older schools tend to be smaller in their square footage per student. And that's primarily because they were really designed to serve a educational delivery model that most of us probably went to school in. It's a corridor with general classrooms on it, just right down the corridor, pretty much. So that creates smaller square footage per student, basically. Islander Middle School, relative to this 153 gross square feet, is at 129. And for those of you, I neglected to point out, Bainbridge is at 151 for their elementary school as an average. So here you're at 129 at the middle school relative to 153, and Bainbridge is at about an average of 132. The high school, relative to 172 gross square feet, you're at 149. And then there's Crest on top of that too. too, of course, for that particular piece of the program, the high school program. So that gives you a general sense. Now, one of the things we wanted to show you is what does that really mean? Like, what does a square foot per student mean? And so I wanted to give you sort of a case study example. And this is not by any means indicating how you would apply an increase in square footage. This is just one model that has nothing to do with what you might want to do here in this district. But it shows you the impact of 5 square feet per student. So some of your schools, if there's like a difference of 5 square feet between these two schools. And this happens to be West Mercer. West Mercer, interestingly enough, is your one elementary school that, if I'm remembering it correctly, has sort of a pod type configuration. And one of the things that the principal said as I was leaving the interview there, she said, if you can just give me one more thing, give me the ability to have 2 more pods so I could have each of my grades actually be able to have that sort of pod configuration, which doesn't exist there. So you're kind of, the point I'm trying to make in a way is that pod configuration, which isn't completely fleshed out throughout the school, could be one of the things that starts to be a reason behind why there's 5 square feet more per student. And you see that here. So the impact of 5 square feet per student, if you have 24 students, say, in a classroom, which is that sort of basis that's kind of the working number for your district at the elementary level, and you multiply 5 square feet times each one of those students, that's equivalent to 120 square feet per classroom. And 120 square feet per classroom times 4 classrooms, so think kind of pod now. And I'm not saying you're going to do pods, but this is just an example. Times 4 classrooms is 480 square feet, which you can now sort of distribute however you see fit based on your programs, the way you're delivering education in your community. And it could be that you said, oh, we're going to take a chunk of that, and that's going to be space that is directly associated with these classrooms where you can have group work happen, you can have individual help with certain students or whatever. That's the kind of thing. And it may be that some of that 480 is applied to other parts of the school in other ways too. So that's just one way to sort of distribute. And you can see how a relatively small amount of square footage per student can really start to change the way in which the school either supports different modes of delivery or not. So that's really just the point of this. So if we look at your individual schools through the lens of educational adequacy, and again, this is, I want to say, this is not trying to like throw darts or, badmouth your schools or anything. That is not the intention here. What's really, we're trying to look at is just to go in with an eye just to see what the conditions are. And most of these are comments that have come from staff and the principals. And I do want to emphasize again that in walking around with the principals and speaking with them, they are not complainers. Your principals here are not out there to try and complain about their facilities. They are amazing with this, in their willingness to take anything and work with it, which is great. I think you're very lucky that way. And I asked them, I said, but at the same time, try and be very open with me with regard to things that you would want a little differently if you could have it. And so these are some of the things that they identified. And you're going to see many of them. We talked about this a bit in the last meeting. There's some real consistency across the comments that they had as I went to each site. And they went on the same day, so it wasn't like they could call up and say, hey, what'd you say? It was like rapid fire discussion. All of the principals in each of the older elementary schools said this almost right out of the chute. They almost took me immediately to that space and said, this is a multi-purpose room, and can we make it work? Yes, absolutely, it does work. But there are some implications to it, and ideally, we really wouldn't have this space serve both PE functions and as a cafeteria. And it does have one of them quoted in the actual amount of impact it has per day in terms of their schedule. So, there's something there to definitely be considered. And if you've ever seen them break this down, because I was there and I've seen this at a couple schools happening. It's very impressive to see it happen. It's amazing, actually. So flex spaces and small group learning areas is another thing that was very consistent really across all the older elementary schools. And this tries to capture a condition that illustrates that. In pretty much all conditions other than the in-class learning situations, the pull-out spaces are right in the corridor. This is not unusual by any means to your older facilities. This is something that almost any district with any older building has this condition. That's just what's happening. And what you do see, as in Northwood here, but to varying degrees, as school districts create new ed specs for a given level, in this case, particular elementary, they are looking for ways to avoid this situation as they do a new facility. So that's what's there. A centralized SPED area with new SPED classroom, occupational therapy, PT room. So those are things that would really be, this particular location felt would be a significant enhancement. Central or general ed classrooms are small. So here you'll see there's a couple things going on there. One is students have, I almost wanted to put another photograph in here, but they have a lot of stuff. They have band instruments and backpacks and all kinds of things that are ending up taking space. And the technology, as awesome as it is, and useful as it is, some of it is pretty large. And so the big screens are coming in the room, and you have to kind of make, the screen place where bodies can't be, because this big, very useful tool is now in the room. So that's something to think about as well. So I'm not going to touch on every one of these. You probably had an opportunity to read through them, but suffice to say, there are a number of bullet points here. There are a few others, but this is really kind of the summary of the major, larger points associated with educational adequacy at Island Park. Lake Ridge, again, you see right at the top here, that same comment, the flex spaces and small group learning areas. Some comments about the relationship of modular or portable space to the main building. And that was talked about both in this, from the standpoint of not optimal for those schools that do use those modulars as classrooms. It's not optimal from a sort of safety, security standpoint, with kids going to restrooms and other support in the main building. But in some instances, they actually end up walking through ongoing classes to get into those facilities rather than have to walk all the way around the existing building, which is more time outside and it's not supervisable so much. That could be less than ideal. Here you have a similar situation you saw in the other school, Island Park, with the pull-out spaces in the corridor. Again, pretty typical, not optimal, but that's just one of the things where each district has to sort of judge, where they fall with regard to where they want to be, and that being in the context of all the need that you may or may not have in a district. Here you see the cart, which we talked about earlier, food cart held out of the gym because of the multi-purpose gym doing all kinds of different things. Similar thing with the portables. The principal wanted me to see this, which is basically one of the restrooms from a privacy sort of standpoint. You open the door and it's like straight shot into the restroom facility, which is not optimal. So I guess my only point with that is there are lots of little things that if you would actually walk around the building and tour it with the staff, they would tell you any one of those things, is it a killer or a bad, terrible situation? No, most likely not. But you might think it is cumulative how many of those there are and what's happening. So Northwood, brand new building. Even with being a brand new building, there are always things that can be learned from the new buildings. People come in and they occupy them and they find out, when we planned this, you know, we might want to tweak things a little bit differently than they were planned. So here you see having things like having a direct access to a restroom from the health room. You know, that's a little detail that would be preferable here. So there are things that each project you learn from and make better. And these things should be built into every new school that you do over time. You take the lessons learned and build on them. But not a long list, no surprise, because this building has more square footage and it was really designed around trying to support different modes of delivery. West Mercer, again, right there at the top, need for separate gym, cafeteria, space, flex spaces again. Language is maybe a little bit different, but you get the same idea. And this is the one where there are the pods and really the request, look, you just give me 2 more pods. That would be the big thing for me. Some discussion about SPED and its location and the need for additional classroom. Acoustics, that's always something to consider from classroom to classroom disruption. I think this comment has really been probably tying to that point of kids having a lot of SEP instruments and also the technology. But if I'm not mistaken, this school actually has a few, if not all classrooms are even a little bit bigger than some of the other elementaries, particularly the corner classrooms. And the teachers there, they request the corner classrooms because they're a little bit larger, even though they have less windows in them. So they'll opt to get a little bit more size rather than and give away the access to natural light, which is probably a hard trade-off at times. Islander Middle School, the principals there talked about multiple detached buildings. You know, not only from this kind of safety security thing, but also the idea of creating community and a lack of connection between students and the programs. They felt that had some impact on that. That the common areas in the classic building, which is the 100-200 building, are difficult to supervise for them, and that the corridors don't accommodate breakout spaces very well. So here's sort of a real direct comparison between the new building, which has breakout areas, and here you see what they're like, and the students, and they were being heavily used when I walked through there. And then this is a typical kind of pull out a breakout area in the classic building. So it's right there you can see a big difference between those two. No surprise, newer facility. Let's see, building 300 science classrooms. So there's some programmatic specific pieces. They commented on, again, sound transfer between classrooms, and depending on the level of it, it can be disruptive. So give you a feel of some of the educational adequacy pieces there. Mercer Island High School, a lot of programmatic things that can be tweaked or improved here. Overall, I think it's a good facility. I mean, there's a lot of good things going on, and the principal certainly supported that, spoke very highly of it. Some comments about the older classrooms with regard to, this is not an easy thing to do, but ideally they would be a little bit larger because holding labs and class in there, if you've ever gone into one of the science classrooms, you get it immediately. It's pretty jam-packed in there. And there were a few other little things that were pointed out for science. So if you wanted to go in and speak to one of the science teachers, if there was something ongoing in the classroom, you had to walk through the classroom to get to their office, which is not optimal in terms of disruption and that kind of thing. So some minor pieces. Music programs have been very successful there. I know they're recently had an expansion of that, and you've been so successful and have been so emphasized that some of the spaces aren't big enough. So they pointed out like the band programs and that kind of thing. They're having a really hard time fitting the larger classes in those spaces because so many kids want to be in there, participating. It's a great problem to have. Counseling was a big point that the principal made, and really reconfiguring and consolidating counseling. And that would also include really making the nurses' room much better than it is just with regard to compliance for confidentiality and those sorts of things. So it was really felt that whole area could really deserve a rework. Providing your theater programs are also another area they've been wonderfully successful in, performing and fine arts. So if you were able to provide a separate black box theater, that would even further enhance your programs. And again, this is coming from the principal. And also would start to free up the theater itself for use by other programs. And that space is apparently used throughout the day almost consistently, the theater space. So, I mean, good for you. You've got a great program there. And now it creates a little bit of a problem. Can you have facility supported the success you've had? Technology within the theater, a whole bunch of stuff is just getting old. So if you're able to address that, that would be a big improvement there. This was really a consistent comment at different levels throughout all your older facilities, reconfiguring the library. You know, the whole function of the library has changed a lot over the last 2 decades. Less book storage, for sure. And for a while, it became sort of the computer lab sort of thing. Here's a photograph of the computers in the high school library. And the principal there really has a dream or a wish that this could be reconfigured in a way that would encourage more students to use it in different ways, whether or not they're coming in there to study in quiet zones where they would not be interrupted if there were a group of 5 students either working as a group or maybe even socializing in that space, not too far away. And so I think, personally, from my standpoint, this space, at least at the high school, is a very central space. There's a lot of square footage there. And if you were able to find a way to reconfigure that in some fashion, it would make the use of that existing space more efficient and to the benefit of the high school students there. That would be a really good thing. It's there, it's big, it's in the middle. You can do some things there that would really be great. Let's see here. Improvements in connectivity made to the CCR programs and, for example, the broadcast programs. Again, there's been some work in there. These are really cool programs, some of them centrally located and visible, but the principal pointed out that some minor tweaks there, really the relationship of classrooms to some of the existing broadcast areas, just as one point, could make some significant benefit to those programs. So suffice to say, throughout the school, there are things that can be done here and there that would really support the programs better. CREST, just a few comments associated with this. Probably the top one is that it's currently too small for the programs that are housed there right now. And so one of the things that would probably be done is to look at exactly what the trajectory for these programs are and ask the question, is the facility actually holding up the progression and or enrollment in these programs to the benefit of certain students in the district? And so I sort of take that first comment that, yeah, we basically need more space to support the success of what's going on here. And they have a greenhouse there. If they could get a new, larger greenhouse, which is part of their programs, that we thought that would be really fabulous. And centralized area of new special education classroom. Yeah, there's also a special ed component in this building, which is really kind of, primarily one, but there's some enhancement that can be done with regard to that program as it's currently housed in this building.
Sorry to interrupt, but for the CREST, could we also maybe add on there why there's so much growth in CREST and that people are leaving high school to go to CREST? I think that's an important question to ask, because if there's a reason that those kids couldn't be finding what they're needing at the high school, it'd be better to support the high school as a whole and keep them on the high school and not improve CREST, but I don't know that CREST needs to grow if the high school is meeting the need.
Right. And that would
Something
be
that might be an
something
important.
like-
So many of the students at Crest don't attend Crest full-time, they go part-time for
Right.
some subjects. And they are some subjects at the high school too, so it is an alternative learning program for kids who who want that small learning community environment. It's not necessarily that they're struggling at the high school. We had kids when we were at the graduation last year who were talking about what universities they were going to. It's just for them that piece of that small learning environment is very conducive for what they're looking for in their high school experience.
I don't disagree with you, but I guess what I'm saying is if there's a way to improve the high school to give them some of that smaller environment for everyone at the high school, it wouldn't be a negative. And then you may not have as many people needing to go to Crest for certain subjects. I don't know, I could be totally wrong. I'm just saying that
Yeah, I
might
don't
be
know.
a
I mean,
It's a
Just
question.
large
outside my-
comprehensive high school, and every large comprehensive high school does try to meet the needs of many students that are there. So most comprehensive high schools then do have some type of alternative program for students who that larger facility doesn't meet their needs. Sometimes, I was speaking with a parent recently, was my child just needs a smaller school, and so that was an option for private school for them. It also houses our online learning for many of our students who choose that as a credit recovery piece or some other reason why they want to do online.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Crest should go away. I'm not saying Crest is not a good thing. There is a plus to it. I'm just saying, as you're saying so many, the growth of Crest, I'm just wondering what that means and why that growth is so much bigger than maybe it needs to be, or maybe it's not. I don't know the answers. That was my question, is that could be a part of the research to that question. I don't know the answers.
And in the other examples, is the alternate high school usually co-located or always separate? Most common.
We've seen it done both. I will tell you something that's not usually co-located at your high school campus is the special ed program that we have at Crest, our adult transition program, otherwise known as HEP. It is generally in a different facility separate from the high school because those are students who really aren't high school anymore. And so it's in a different location where the facility accommodates those students' life skills and job potential skills that can be accommodated within that facility in and of itself. So generally we'll have things like kitchen, laundry, and other kinds of life skills to it, as well as offices and job career center for them. So that one is unique being on the facility. Generally that's some
That's located in the community,
Yeah.
in the community setting, not in the school setting. It just happens to be a Crest.
Where else?
Where else?
Yes.
Quick question, in the graphic where it showed kind of the square footage per student, I noticed Crest was quite a bit lower than the other facilities. My question is, did it factor in that some of the students were part-time? So for example, if it was 100 students, was it counted as 100 or like 0.6? You know, and you know, the high school as well, if they're kind of shared classes.
It's not part-time doesn't factor into it, but it's not uncommon for an alternative program to have a smaller square foot per student because they're not providing specialized spaces like gyms and theaters and things like that you have at the comprehensive.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand how I should read the graphic. You know,
Well-
is it really as sort of low on space as it appears to be, or is there something more going on?
No, I wouldn't, I guess what I would say, I'm gonna look to Jennifer for this to any further comment, but I wouldn't read a lot into this in terms of being an inordinately low number for this facility. You know, Jen pointed out that this facility doesn't have the gym of any sort. That's a huge amount of square footage that would really, pump that up. It doesn't really have a library to speak of, right? So that's another large space. It does have sort of a couple of commons areas in it, including a small dining kind of area, but not a big square footage for that. So all of those things start to push down. There are some things, though, that while it probably would only impact this a small number of square feet are worth noting. And one of those is like their science rooms. There was a comment that their science rooms are maybe a little bit smaller than they would want, a little bit less fit out than a high school science room you would want to have. So those sorts of things might cause that to adjust slightly, but not anywhere.
So you really just have to get into the details to understand.
Yeah, yeah. And the size part of it is probably more. I'm going to look over to our discussions here. Is probably that comment is associated with enrollment more so than, although saying tweaks to programs like the science rooms maybe a little bigger or whatever. That would increase that percentage of size some. It's really more an enrollment thing that would create the need for a larger one, which then goes back to your point of are there other alternatives out there that still have a crest?
And some of it is just the configuration of that whole building. It's got this big central place, which they do use because they do check in with students and it's very effective. But then the smaller breakout spaces are limited. And we do have certainly our ATP program there. We have some other special education services that are taking up some of the office spaces and smaller spaces in there. So it does become almost similar to what you're hearing about the other schools is we don't have those small breakout spaces to accommodate groups of students who are working either with a staff member or with each other. It's
it's essentially classrooms, pretty efficient floor plate. I mean, it's classrooms off of a corridor with a central small central commons area, and then a little separate kind of food area where they can eat lunch, not very large. So it's not a lot of fluff there for sure.
Thanks.
Is the Boys and Girls Club really not being used for any school facilities anymore besides the preschool? It was my understanding that there would be some sharing of space along the way. Is that kind of off the table now? It just is not a good fit, a good connection.
It's difficult to use the space during the main piece that we use it for during the day would be for adult activities, i.e. professional development or meeting space. But it is a bit tricky because those spaces are then co-used either before and after school for the before and after school program. There is in the interlocal agreement that a preschool will be there, so there is a preschool there. The gymnasium space is used all the time.
We use the gym, and Becky can speak to this more, but we do use the gym pretty much every school day after school from 3 to 6. We use half the field house, or we have the ability to use half the field house.
It's used every day. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you would use it and you pulled out all your stuff and you did your work, you just have to make sure you clean it all up before you go.
And proximity is a little bit of a challenge to make it from the main campus of the high school down to the peak.
But for a discrete program like the ATP or something like that, I don't know. If Crest is expanding, it's there for a discrete program like that. I don't know if that's
Again, it's
even
the
fit to consider.
Yeah, it's the specific needs of that type of special education programs. Weren't met when we did try it over there. There was we didn't provide what the students really need to be successful.
So it's kind of off of the, that's why it's out of, because you mentioned that it was completely out of the picture earlier, but I knew that there were still some relationships going on there to consider.
Another thing was that the students in that adult program are 18 to 21, and the Boys and Girls Club had a limitation of high school and 18. And so there's some issues there. So, but the main thing is the setting was not right. It does not.
Yeah, I didn't mean to pick that one in particular, but is it on the table for us to even look at for?
We do use it. We do. We work with
We're working with the Boys and Girls Club now to bring it into our centralized scheduling process. So it will be part of the district facility. We do share a lot of common pieces that we Club uses our field, they sometimes will go over here and use this playground. You know, I know the high school has come down and used it for different events, so presentations, things like that.
But more one-off deals rather than ongoing.
We don't have something that's in every day at 10
Yeah.
o'clock.
Okay. I didn't want to belabor that point.
Any other questions about this category, educational adequacy? Yeah.
Just had a quick one. I noticed in all the elementary schools there were a lot of consistencies, like you said.
Yeah.
The gym and lunch space I totally get, having had two kids just going through that whole system. The breakout spaces I totally get. The third one sort of surprised me in that it was so consistent, and it had to do with special ed and how that worked. And can you shed some more light on the sort of what the challenges are there that aren't being met? Or why those were so consistently sort of held the challenge?
Well, I can kind of share maybe some highlights that I heard from the principals. I'm wondering if there's anything that the district would like to open.
So part of it is the facility that was built here at Northwood does more than adequately meet the needs of our special needs students that are here in this program. It has specific spaces for occupational therapy and physical therapy, which are really an important part of the students' programs. And so when you're at an older elementary school, those were not pieces that were considered, and so they're making do by trying to find small spaces. Sometimes you walk around a school. I know I've done it at Island Park and opened a door thinking I was going into a closet, and there was a staff member working in there for the student, providing some kind of services with the equipment as best as they can within that small space. So some of it is just having the equipment that is really fits within the space that they're working in. I'm sure you've all read about the elevated needs of students that we now see in our schools, and so how do we best meet their needs within a facility as a safe environment for them as well when you're trying to create a safe space for special needs students. It is easier if you can have the right space that's large enough that can provide for all the equipment that keeps the children and the adults.
And being very flexible in that space.
Yeah.
It's always changing. Every student or every group of students that come through it, it's never the same. So we have to be flexible, and we're constantly changing these spaces to meet the needs of the ever changing.
Tony builds a wall to take it down the next year because we're trying to build a sensory space.
I'd like to leave it up here.
Or any bathrooms, right?
Right, bathrooms are a big piece as well.
But it's square footage is what I'm hearing. It's really additional space that's necessary to house
Yes.
equipment.
And when you can build in the equipment to be built into the room, it makes students' lives so much better because the staff is so much more able to help them.
And it's also, I would say, for some of it, it's proximity. So this sensory comment here in safe spaces, if you have, and the principal talked about it at Island Park, is if you have a student who needs to get to one of these spaces because they're kind of having a crisis, ideally, they wouldn't have to walk through the corridors, at the verge of crisis or in crisis to get to the only sensory room, which is at the other end of the school. So one of the things that she talked about was, there's square footage, but it's also where it's distributed throughout the school too. So she was really hoping that you could get them around where kids could have fast access to things.
I had a question, I guess maybe this is for Donna, but I don't know if state regulations have changed about spaces for special ed, and are we in compliance with whatever we need to be in terms of I don't know, because I think it's changed so much, right, since I was a kid in terms of what services are available in schools, and are there spaces that need to be built? Or that we need to
We are absolutely in compliance because we do make best use of our facilities and meet the needs of our students by adjusting our facilities.
But I mean, are there ways in which we could meet it better, I guess is what I'm saying,
So we can always get better,
Right.
Yeah. If you get a chance, walking into this Island Park, go there and walk into this bedroom, you see the impact of the equipment in the room. It's a converted classroom, really, and they have a lot of equipment that just need space. So there's another question. Someone raised their hand here.
I don't want to sound insensitive because I totally am supportive of this, but I just have a question. Along with all this growth that we're talking about, like the amount of students, etc., is there a way to track the growth of the need of these spaces? Like, should we be considering in our planning doubling these spaces? Like, I don't know what the growth is for the amount of kids they expect to need it.
I don't
So
know if
to
you can
just
speak to the trajectory.
and that might be insensitive. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I don't know the answer to it.
Our enrollment, as you saw, is really pretty flat, and that is what we're projecting, particularly where we live. We're using enrollment here for capacity, but we also use it at Lincoln and Tye for our budget projections, and so we're looking at it relatively flat. However, our special ed numbers continue to stay relatively high and are growing. So the percentage of special ed students, as we try to keep it within a range, it's still in the same higher numbers that it was for the overall.
I just wanted to offer another perspective as well, because the direction of special education is not self-contained. We're trying not to self-contain as much as possible, so students are really integrated throughout the facility. And so another level we haven't talked about is the entire facility's ability to meet the needs of, for example, students with autism, light spectrum issues, sensory kind of needs, quietness. And so there's the overlay of the square footage within specific places and spaces, but there's also the overlay of the entire facility and how it is designed to best meet students whose as the behavior and autism and different issues are coming through are really an entire facility question and not necessarily just a specific set of spaces.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if you meet the needs of some, a lot of times you meet the needs of more than you expect.
Absolutely.
So
My question is for you, because you talked about like meeting the needs of kids within the main classroom. And I've been in some of these classrooms that are so tiny. I'm like, how on earth are you going to meet the needs of a sensory child in the main classroom? Like where is there space to put a safe place for them? Or is this the safe place in the classroom? This would take a whole reconfiguration of things to meet some of the needs of these kids that are coming in and being included in classroom settings, which is fantastic. But are we set up for that? I've been in the classrooms. It looks like we're doing the best we can.
That's part of the question that we're asking you as a community on the educational adequacy piece.
Can I ask you if you feel like the classrooms overall are adequate to meet that need? Without sounding like I'm trying to put anybody on the spot. Like I think Mercer Island does a great job, but let's be honest. Do you feel like some of our older facilities have that capability within the four walls of the current classrooms?
I think Mercer Island is in the same position a lot of schools are in with regard to this aspect. And so
Right.
I think that you are right along with everybody else within the region and the district, and honestly, the entire education system, and trying to figure out how to adjust. We're seeing this, the idea of special education or special needs or support systems or scaffolded support, actually the biggest area that's changing in the ed spec, in how facilities need to adjust in the future. Districts are going back and doing renovations and pieces like that, which has been mentioned as well. So I know I wouldn't put Mercer Island in any place that isn't. I couldn't say the same thing about Bainbridge.
Right, no, and that's, so I know that there's a lot, you're being very careful about what you're saying. And I'm looking for a direct answer, I'm a very direct person. So I guess what I'm saying is like, I'm hearing things like perhaps it's not easy to move walls in Island Park. So I'm like, okay, so if we're saying we have these needs in the classrooms, like let's be real here about what we can do with our buildings and what we actually need. You know, that helps me make a better decision as to what I'm going to go out there and tell the people that I'm in contact with in this community. Like, you know, we have these great buildings and stuff, but gosh, it's not meeting the needs that research shows us that kids need in these certain situations. We physically don't have the space. The teachers are doing the best they can in closets, in hallways. Our kids deserve better. Our teachers deserve better. So I guess like I just feel like the classrooms themselves, what does that look like? Can you show us what a well-designed classroom looks like that meets these needs so we can see a comparison so that we can understand just where we are and where we'd like to be?
Yep. So I mean, I think I really hate saying that we are sitting in a space where we could go to that pretty easily, but Northwood, the way we design the classrooms, you know, it's L-shaped.
classroom. So the idea that a student who might be have a scaffold support system has the option to be in the classroom, out of the classroom, the way in which that little safe space nook is kind of created can be adjusted. And then in addition, you have the level of the shared learning and you have the acoustic privacy of a small group room. So there are definitely ways in which you could look at what's happening here. I would wait to hear from the teachers and the students in early January to really be able to say that we can always do better.
Right. I mean, there's going to be new research that comes out in 5 years that says, hey, this is better. So we're always chasing better.
Yes.
But
I would say most districts in the area that you consider as your peers have similar approaches to how schools have changed, and they're definitely different than they were when
And I think that having walked through the schools, the closest thing in your existing schools that I saw to what Joanne referenced here, which is the sort of L-shaped classroom, is if you look at the corner classrooms in West Mercer, which are the ones that the teachers really desire because they're a little bit bigger, they actually have this weird kind of corner nook space in it. And if the ones that I walked in, they're furnished differently. And that space is, I think, being used as an ad hoc zone.
I feel visuals are helpful sometimes because you hear an extra 5 square feet per student, but when you see how a teacher has used that, you go, oh, okay, space, like space, we know space is important. But when we see, because I mean, I haven't been in a super modern school for a long time. I used to teach, but I taught in schools that were older. So like updated spaces, I'm used to the closet. I'm used to doing these things, but
well, I'll give you, at the risk of going out there, I'll give you a little more direct answer. Is they interpret what Joanne said, and if I misinterpret, correct me. But you have older schools.
Yeah, we do.
And those older schools, when they were designed, were never designed in an environment that even took any of this, what we're talking about, into consideration, right? It was a model where you had 18 or 20 identical classrooms, or nearly identical classrooms, of about 900-ish square feet off of the double corridor. I went to a school like that. And they weren't built to try and serve students with these kinds of needs. Were the students there that had those kinds of needs? Sure they were. Were they in the number, the population you have now? I don't know. But someone probably has that data. Could you reconfigure your existing buildings to serve that? Possibly. Would it take a wholesale tearing out walls and what we would call decompression of that facility? Absolutely. Because if you're going to be working, we talked a little bit about it last time, but, and by the way, I'm not advocating that you should go in and do all this. Is going to be your decision.
This need that keeps coming up. What does this look like? Yeah.
So when you want to enhance or reconfigure the programs at a given school, if someone came up and was asking about, can you do, or would you do an addition to an older school? And there's a lot of, well, it depends kind of things associated with that. But one thing you know is if you have an older school with a fixed floor plan that was set up in a model that was designed for education in 1956, which served us all, again, or at least served you probably. And you build a new piece on that to reconfigure the program. It's the new piece that you're playing with that you can adjust how all those programmatic pieces come together. None of that will impact the other 80 or 90% of the school unless you go in there and impact it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, if you start to add spaces in that existing floor plate, sensory rooms, rooms that might require a little more square footage for equipment, like OTPT spaces or whatever, it kind of squishes out space into another part of the building that doesn't exist. You decompress it, so to speak, right? And so that typically involves a very significant modernization of that building. And that is where you start to get into these conversations, which would not surprise me if you do, and when you start planning over the next 3 meetings, on where you draw the line to achieve certain objectives that might require wholesale
This sounds pretty safe.
versus replacement at some point in time. And that those I'm sure you'll have those conversations. And you'll land where it makes sense for you to land as a Bainbridge community. Or Bainbridge. Yeah. Bainbridge.
It's getting late.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I was wondering, like, because I think what I was trying to get at earlier on with my question was, like, I feel like just anecdotally from a parent point of view, I hear parents like arguing to keep the IEP for their kids or trying to, and so that like the number of kids who are on IEPs versus the number of parents who think their kids should be on IEPs versus like, I wonder if there's a way which we can think about, I think what you were saying, I can't remember what it was, but configuring all the spaces so there is more individualized learning, so maybe parents feel less like they need their kid needs an IEP to get the kind of individualized learning that they want.
Right.
And that, because I feel like, and this is again anecdotally, but it's like I know a lot of people who moved to Hamlin Robinson or moved to other schools, they feel like they can't get that here, and I'm wondering how much of that is a facilities issue. Like if we can make our whole buildings more amenable to individualized learning.
Right.
Who is using special ed services might change. That number may change, and it may stop increasing or
Right.
decrease depending on.
Yeah, my suspicion is if you would ask the principals of these schools, they would say that the facilities do have a role. A lot to wrestle with. It'll be fun. Any other questions about educational adequacy? Okay. All right. So let's just quickly go over next steps and where we're at. That pretty much wraps up tonight, which we're ahead of schedule. Great. We got here a little earlier. So next steps, we are going to be going out for broader outreach session on January 13th, week of January 13th, I believe.
We'll actually have notices that will go out, sort of a save the date before we go on winter break, just to hopefully have people put it on your calendar, and then we'll hit it really hard with communications. Craig and I were actually talking about that this morning when we come back from break to get it back in to everyone's back on the calendar. And for students, we're going to use Schoology.
Okay.
How many students are coming?
Well, we'll invite.
How many would you like, ultimately?
How many would we like?
More the merrier. Yeah, we don't want to limit who comes or anything. I think I would say we can facilitate upwards of 1 to 200 if they came.
We have the library booked, Will.
Okay.
So
And really,
find a bigger space if you need to.
and the purpose of this will all be in the flyer, but and remember we've got the public outreach, and then we've got the student outreach, and then also the staff. But the purpose of it is to really, it'll probably be about 2-hour meetings, and what we'd like to do is take kind of the first half, or hopefully less than the first half, if we can get it down to the first third or something. A very high level overview summary of the need that you have seen. So this meeting with them just really kind of sharing out what you guys have already known, but at a high level, just so that they can absorb that. They can ask some questions about it. They can say, oh, hey, I've got a need here that you missed. Why don't you think about this? And they'll give us something, right? We will then capture that. We'll bring it back to you so that you can hear what they've said. And our next meeting with you, which is in January 27th, I want to say, right, will be our first of 3 planning meetings. And so that we'll be working to put together some sort of exercises that are intended to allow you to get together in groups of some form and start to talk about a lot of the things that you are already bringing out and talking about. And we'll design some exercises that will facilitate getting those questions out on the table. Don't be surprised if that first meeting for you, as you're struggling and talking about all these different things, feels really chaotic. I mean, that's just the nature of things, because this is the first time that you're going to be really wrestling with all these different things. and we'll do our best to try and lend a little bit of order to it if we can, as you're talking through this as a group. So that's the beginning of the planning meetings. So it's very important that you all come back. Again, I want to really encourage you to come back because you've invested this information in yourself and in this group. And now is the time when you can take this information and determine what, if anything, makes sense from your standpoint to do about the facilities. Question back?
I think from the last couple of sessions, I hear kind of a little bit of a disconnect between what people are able to visualize versus what's possible, whether it's classroom innovation or sustainability, or what teachers have versus what they need, or what does an innovative or technologically appropriate classroom look like. Would it be possible to have some examples of progressive local projects that are, you know, pushing the limits in terms of technology or in terms of special education or sustainability? Or I think just to give an idea of what's possible before we dive into what we think should be. Is before, I guess, not knowing what's possible, I feel like is going to inhibit the conversation.
Well, the answer to that question is yes. I think we could pull together some examples. We had shown a few sort of loosely in the last meeting, but we're happy to bring some more back in. We might kick the meeting off with a quick slideshow of something like that. I wouldn't want to take more than about 5 minutes or so as a quick overview, because what I want to make sure that we're allowing your group enough time to really kind of deliberate and talk about and just get out all the issues. It's really, really important that you have time to do that, and that you're able to, after you've done that, and again, we'll structure it so that it'll sort of make sense once you're doing it, that you'll be able to share out the discussions that you've been having, like what are the key issues you discussed, what are the priorities, you know, those sorts of things to this group, right? So you can all hear each other and you can ask questions of each other, because as a process, that's how over the course of the 3 meetings, you kind of go from a whole broad group of things you're talking about to starting to kind of make sense of it and hopefully align yourselves with what makes the most sense. So that's where we're going. Okay.
Is a field trip to see any of the facilities here appropriate? For example, we talked about special ed, maybe seeing special ed in Northwood or upstairs, or I mean, I know what the schools are
I'm
going.
sure we can. I think we want to make sure we get the teachers adequate.
Sure.
You know.
I know, or even seeing what isn't this, like seeing what park looks like. Or the others like have an advantage. I know what those look like, but some folks might not.
That would really be, as you're pointing out, more of a coordination part of the district and scheduling and that kind of thing. I mean, I can imagine maybe, you know, at the end of the school day or something, you might be able to arrange a small window of time, you know, just a 20-minute walkthrough or something kind of like that, I suppose.
Maybe after we do when we reach out to staff and so they know what we're working on, it would be a better time to try to coordinate something.
So it's a little straw poll. Let's just do a quick little straw poll. How many of you here have been in more than the facility that your child went to elementary school in? In other words, you've been in that one. Have you been in one? Okay. So and how many of you have been in all of the schools in the last 5 years? Okay, so quite a few, really. Yeah. So whether or not they've had an opportunity to dig down into some of the more detailed spaces, like the SPED spaces, that might be another little question.
Well, and I'm thinking there might be a privacy issue. I would assume.
Well, there are students there, yeah.
No, but even names.
Yeah.
You don't want names on desks or names
Right.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, I brought it up.
It's okay. It's all fair game. Right?
Oh,
That's what I said. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, we are done for tonight. Look forward to seeing you guys. And we'll be posting more information on the website.
You'll have to wait for us.